One of the most difficult things about believing in God is trying to talk about it. Someone asks us why we believe or how our life is different because we do, and there are no words true enough, right enough, or big enough to explain. We rummage around for something to say, but everything sounds either too vague or too pious. We could talk about how our heart feels full to bursting sometimes, or about the mysterious sense of kinship we feel with other human beings. We could talk about how many times even the worst things that happen to us seem to have some kind of blessing hidden within them somewhere. But the truth is that it's impossible to speak directly about holy things. How can the language of earth capture the reality of heaven? How can words describe that which is beyond all words? How can human beings speak of God? We don't do it well, that's for sure, but because we must somehow try, we tend to talk about what we cannot say in terms of what we can. We tend to describe holy things by talking about ordinary things and trusting each other to make the connections. Believing in God is like coming home. It's like jumping off the high dive, like getting struck by lightning, like falling in love. We can't say what it is exactly, but we can say what it's like. And most of us get the message. Any of us who still have our notes from high school English class probably remember a section on learning about figures of speech, where we were taught about metaphors, talking about one thing by referring to another thing, getting at the meaning of one thing by comparing it to another. Sometimes the comparisons are comfortable and familiar. Her eyes were as blue as the sky, as blue as a robin's egg, as blue as the sea. But other times the comparisons are, they're jarring, startling. Her eyes were as blue as a bruise, as blue as ink spilled on a white page, as blue as a wave just before it breaks. When the comparisons catch us by surprise, they make us stop, make us think. How can these two things be alike? What do they have in common? How deep does this connection go? When the comparisons catch us by surprise, our everyday understanding of things is broken open, and we're invited to explore them all over again, to go inside them and see what's new. Jesus did it all the time. Throughout the Gospels, and in Matthew's Gospel in particular, he was always making comparisons. Sinners are like lost sheep. The Word of God is like seed sown on different kinds of ground. The kingdom of heaven is like a wedding feast. God is like the owner of a vineyard. The kingdom of heaven is like this, Jesus said over and over again, telling his followers stories about brides and grooms, sheep and shepherds, wheat and tares. Why did he teach that way? Why didn't he just come right out and say what he meant? If anyone in the world were qualified to speak directly about God, surely it was Jesus. And yet he too spoke indirectly, making surprising comparisons between holy things and ordinary things, breaking open our everyday understanding of things and inviting us to explore them all over again. In today's passage, he launches a volley of such comparisons. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, he says, like yeast, like buried treasure, like a fine pearl, like a net cast into the sea. The images come quickly, one right after another, with no preparation, no explanation, no time for questions and answers. It's not like him to be in such a rush. He's usually a better storyteller than that, gathering his listeners around and sliding into his tale with one of those time-honored introductions like, there once was a landowner, or there once was a king. When he does, his followers settle down to listen, knowing that the story will be full of meaning for them, knowing that they better listen well. But these 5 flashes of the kingdom come on us so quickly that there's no time to settle down. Jesus zings us with them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like snapshots, like scenes glimpsed through the windows of a fast-moving train. The kingdom of heaven is like this and this and this, he says. It's almost like he doesn't want us to think too much about them, like he doesn't want us to get stuck on any one of them, but instead be dazzled by the number and variety of the things the kingdom of heaven is like this and this and this. The first 2 comparisons seem easy enough. The kingdom is like a mustard seed or a handful of yeast. Nothing much to look at. Not very impressive to look at least not at first. But give either of them something to work on. Sow the seed, mix the yeast with flour, and the results can be astounding. A tree big enough for birds to nest in. Bread enough to feed the family for a month. If the kingdom of heaven is like that, then it's surprising, potent, and more than meets the eye. The next pair of comparisons is more difficult. First, the kingdom is like a man who finds buried treasure in a field, covers it back up, and sells all that he owns to buy the field. He's a poor man who becomes rich through luck. And second, the kingdom is like a merchant who searches for and finds a pearl of great price, selling all that he owns to buy it. He is a rich man who becomes richer through skill. But rich or poor, skillful or just plain lucky, each finds something of great value and sells all that he has to make it his own. Each finds something that makes everything else he owns trivial by comparison, and he doesn't think twice about trading it all in. If the kingdom is like that, then it's rare but attainable for those who are not only willing but eager to pay the price. The final comparison of the kingdom and a fishing net takes a different tack altogether. Thrown into the sea, the net gathers fish of every kind, good and bad, which are sorted out once the net is full. If the kingdom is like that, then it's not, in the end, something we find, but something that finds us and hauls us into the light. It's a lot. It's a lot to digest at one sitting. But the striking thing to me about all these images is their essential hiddenness. The mustard seed hidden in the ground. The yeast hidden in the dough. The treasure hidden in the field. The pearl hidden among all the other pearls. The net, hidden in the depths of the sea. If the kingdom is like these, then it's not something readily apparent to the eye, but something that must be searched for, something just below the surface of things, waiting there to be discovered and claimed. Information like that has always tantalized the human imagination. A retired school bus driver takes up rock collecting and spends his weekends at local flea markets looking for interesting stones. One day he picks up a round one about the size of a walnut and likes the way it feels in his hand. So he buys it and takes it home and polishes it up and shows it to his friend, the jeweler, who tells him that what he has bought for $1.50 is a 250-carat ruby. A poor single mother of 3 is notified of her aunt's death in a distant city. Since she is her aunt's only kin, she buys a bus ticket with the end of her grocery money and goes to sort through the old woman's things. Packing her aunt's old brown wool coat in a box for the Salvation Army, she feels something stiff down around the hem and discovers $100 bills sewn into the lining. A young research librarian without an adventurous bone in his body is shelving old books one day when one falls apart in his hands. As he tries to stack all the loose pages back together again, a yellowed slip of paper falls out of the ruined binding. Picking it up off the floor and holding it to the light, he finds himself staring at an ancient map to Shangri-La, or the Fountain of Youth, or King Solomon's Mines. It's the stuff legends are made of. The sunken treasure, the secret knowledge, the long-lost masterpiece gathering dust in the attic, suddenly discovered, suddenly found and claimed and enjoyed amid much celebration. That's what the kingdom of heaven is like, Jesus says. Whether it begins as a seed hidden in the ground or a treasure hidden in a field, the kingdom comes when it is no longer hidden but revealed. When the tree is full grown, when the treasure chest is opened, when what was lost is found, and what was secret is known, and what was hidden away is brought forth for everyone to see. It's exciting business. But where do we begin? Without a treasure map or an ant, or much luck shopping for rubies, where do we start looking for the hidden kingdom of heaven? All of these metaphors are great. All of these parables about seeds and yeast and nets are intriguing. But when it comes right down to hunting the honest-to-goodness kingdom of heaven, where are we supposed to start? Seems like we ought to start someplace really holy, someplace really extraordinary, like a medieval monastery maybe, translating ancient texts with biblical scholars. Maybe we should begin in the Holy Land, or at the Vatican, or in Washington at the National Cathedral. Then again, it may not matter where we are exactly, as long as we keep our eyes open for extraordinary clues wherever we are, looking for heavenly visions, listening for heavenly voices. Because if the kingdom of heaven is hidden in this world, then it's hidden really well. And only the most dedicated detectives among us stand a chance of finding it at all. Unless, of course, God has resorted to the oldest trick in the book. There's always that possibility that God decided to hide the kingdom in the last place that any of us would think to look. Like a silver spoon in the drawer with the stainless. Like a diamond necklace on the bureau with the rhinestones. The kingdom of heaven all mixed in with the humdrum and ho-hum of our days. As easy to find as an amaryllis bulb in the dark basement suddenly sending forth a shoot, or a child's smile when she wakes from sleep, or the first thunderstorm after a long drought. Jesus knew it all along. Why else would he talk about farmers and women baking bread and merchants buying and selling things and fishermen sorting fish? If we want to speak of heavenly things, then why not start right here in all the ordinary people and places and activities of our lives? If we want to describe that which is beyond all words, then we might as well begin with words we know. Woman, man, child, field, seed, bird, air, yeast, bread, laughter, tears, music, flower, pearl, net, fish, sea, joy. The kingdom is like these things, found in these things. These are the places to dig for the kingdom. These are the places to look for the will and rule and presence of God. If we can't find them here, we'll never find them anywhere else. For earth, this earth, for life and breath, for looking into the eyes of another human being, hearing the sound of their voice, feeling the wind blow across our skin. This life, right now, this moment, right now, on this earth, is where the seeds of heaven are sown. And their treasure is the only one worth having. Their treasure is the only one worth having. Thanks be to God. Amen.